Perhaps the indifference in the face of the customs man when I announced the reason for my visit, a search for my grandmother's Cuba, should have warned me I might not find it. History, after all, had transformed her beloved country into a strange, unfamiliar place. But even if Cuba hadn't been different, the island to which she had taken me as a child had splintered in my memory into fragments of images. An aunt's white house, lustrous in the sunlight, a curved iron grill, fan lights, carmine and cobalt blue, a dense garden shaded with Indian laurel, a refuge where I felt loved, secure. But I, too, had changed and become someone else. The sun-drenched island my grandmother and I had known together was as irrecoverable to me as the Cuba of Spanish galleons, silver buckles, and golden doubloons. My early Cuban adventure resulted from a very American childhood. My parents, who had lived in New York City, had started out as the sort of couple that made people think of romantic comedies. An attractive Vassar graduate descended from New England Congregational ministers, and a handsome dreamer from Cuba, a man with pale blue eyes, whose ancestors were careful merchants from Barcelona. They fell in love with each other, or thought they had. More probably, my father was infatuated with my mother's good looks, her energy and brains. When he looked at her, he thought he saw America. My mother's romance was with Europe and the Caribbean, with noble causes, the Spanish Civil War, and the dream of a better world. 2 years after they met, my parents married. It must have seemed a glamorous marriage. The parties, the long evenings with writers and artists, Ernest Hemingway, Sherwood Anderson, the painter Rufino Tamayo, and the exiled leaders of the Spanish Republic. But my father, who had once found my mother charming, soon thought her brittle and superficial. Meanwhile, she began to find him tedious, too serious. The marriage hurtled backwards to its predictable end. I was not even a year old when my mother fell in love with another man, and my small private universe fell apart. Although I was too young to remember the cold, black moment of abandonment, I was defined through that experience, one that would lend a particular emotional texture to my childhood. As a little girl in the 40s and 50s, I rarely saw either of my parents. My mother had left me behind, in New York City, where I was born, when she ended her marriage to my father. He had vanished as well, World War II had just ended, and had gone to Lisbon on a mission for the State Department. From Portugal he sent me many dolls, folk dolls made of white yarn and dressed in bright red aprons. They came in pairs, like other people's parents. "Que muñecas tan lindas!" everyone said. "What perfectly beautiful dolls!" "Él debe quererte mucho." He must love you very much. My Cuban grandmother, a melancholy woman with a will of steel, determined to separate me forever from these two frivolous people who had grown tired of each other. Her judgment of my mother was particularly severe. What could be said of a woman so selfish that she could fall in love with another man, leave her husband, and abandon her daughter forever? As compensation, or perhaps restitution, for the painful exile into which she believed my mother had delivered me, my grandmother decided that for part of each year we would leave New York and visit her family in Cuba. "Que niña más linda!" my Cuban aunts and cousins would chorus. "What a beautiful child! Sabes que la madre, una americana, la abandonó." Her mother, you know, an American woman, abandoned her. My mother's family, formal Bostonians who loved Emerson's essays and Sargent's paintings, sent me Christmas cards, scarves, and gloves on birthdays, but I almost never saw them. I was often told that when my mother had announced her future plans to Uncle Willie, the family patriarch, he had thundered, "How dare you do this to your daughter? Where is Wendy?" Willard Gardner Sperry, dean of the Harvard Divinity School, Plummer Professor of Christian Morals, had no tolerance for a niece who had sacrificed her marriage and an infant child to follow the heady course of her passions. Hadn't I, after all, been hijacked by my father's family? In Cuba, aunts and cousins chattered about me as they played mahjong. Their own lives were languid games played under the old traditional rules. I must have been almost an adolescent when I first began to understand that to my